Berachot Bulgaria. Chapter 2, Tanya. Here we go. The peace of God in you, section 1, your second soul. In chapter 1, the Tanya introduced us to Rabbi Chaim Vital's doctrine of the two souls. We learned that the first animal soul is driven by an egocentric energy called Kalipa and is largely responsible for bad temperaments. In this chapter, we will examine the second divine soul. The second soul is the Israelite, the so-called divine soul. It's a piece of God above, literally. The description of the soul is literally divine is striking, since Jewish teachings are usually careful to emphasize a sharp distinction between the Creator and His creations. Rabbi Chaim Vital explains, the soul's light arises and flows from the light of the 10 sefer, divine powers themselves, without any intermediary, which is why the verse states, "You are children of God, your God." For the soul is like a child who is completely attached to his father, from who his being flows. The application of the verse, a piece of God above, to describe this attachment of the soul dates back to Sfat Kabbalist, Rabbi Moshe Kovodera, from 1522 to 1570. Rabbi Elijah Divertus, from 1518, Ramak's student, used this phrase in his popular Kabbalistic works, Reshai Chochmah, which appeared in print as early as 1578, and from there it became a standard reference in the Kabbalistic ethical literature. The emphasis literally is the first round in the Rabbi Shabbatai Shefto Horowitz, Shefaital, referencing that book. The idea of the divine soul is suggested by the verse describing man's creation, and God blew into his nostrils the breath of life. Nachmanides, an early Spanish Kabbalist, was the first to explain this verse as evidence of divine soul. This verse hints for us the virtue of the soul. It states that God breathed into his nostrils a soul of life, to inform you that the soul is not derived from the elements, rather it is the Spirit of God. That's cool. And the same idea suggested by the phrase, "The soul you breathed into me," in the morning prayers. And as the sages of Zohar state, that unlike speaking, which uses relatively little breath, one who blows from his innards, meaning from the innermost depths of his being. For when a person blows forcibly, he exhales with a deep-rooted inner energy. The biblical metaphor of blowing in man's soul suggests that God has a deep inward attachment with the soul, in distinction to the rest of the creation, which aroused through the more superficial speech of God. God said, "Let there be." While the Tanya refers to this as a teaching of the Zohar, it is not found in our Zohar text. It is, however, cited as a teaching of the sages by Rabbi Naftali Hertz Bar Charach in Emelech HaMelech, the Valley of the King. A further teaching which illustrates the intimate connection between the second soul and God's is the midrashic idea of Jewish people arising in God's mind prior to creation. In the same vein, the midrash depicts the Jew's soul as having arisen in the mind of God. Genesis Rabbah 1:4, before the creation of the world. This intimate connection is also depicted scripturally as a parental relationship. As the verse states, "Israel, my firstborn son, you are children to God, your God." What is the connection between the midrashic idea of the soul arising from the mind of God and the biblical metaphor of souls as children of God? To clarify this point, Tanya now enters into a discussion which will be central to our chapter concerning the spiritual origins of a child in his or her father. This means that just as a child is derived from the brain of the father, likewise, each person in Israel is derived from God's blessed thought and wisdom, so to speak. I'm very curious about that. Child being derived from the brain of the father.
No, because there's a Chassidic thought that when a child is born, it's a desire of both the parents in conceiving the child. And if I'm not mistaken, it works like this: if the desire first comes from the mother, then it's a girl, and if it comes from the father, it's a girl. It's a boy. The other one, really.
So it could also come from the woman's mind?
Yeah. Well, there's always two parts to creating.
Yeah. But why here only says child's derived from the brain of the father.
Well, it says so in the Zohar. I don't know. We'll have to check the Zohar next time. Yeah, well, no, that's what. No, it's comparing the two things because remember when we're talking about God, He's the Father.
Yeah.
And we're the mother, because we're Israel always take the feminine side.
Okay.
In the relationship with God, He's the husband, and we're.
But we're talking about the soul, our divine soul.
Yeah. So like a father conceives a child, so has Hashem conceived us before we're put on this earth.
But we're not. We wouldn't be the woman in that case because the woman didn't exist. He had to create.
I suppose. Basically, but here the Zohar says that the child is derived from the brain of the father, and that means we all come from God.
Yeah, I get that part, but I didn't get the other way around. Like deriving a child, I feel like it'd be more coming from the brain of the mother. I guess it's the seed. I guess it's the brain could be like thought, the initial idea, and then the woman could build it up. Alright, here we go.
Yeah, sure. From antiquity until the early modern period, it was believed that the male seed was physically derived from the cerebral matter of the brain, passing down the spine and exiting through a duct at the spine's base. Well, this was later shown to be anatomically incorrect. The Kabbalists accepted the brain-spine seed pathway as spiritually valid. In one of his discourses, Rabbi Zalman made it clear that he understood the idea non-literally. It must be a spiritual power that emerges from the brain, as he says in Torah or. Here, the Tanya uses the brain-seed-child connection to illustrate how the children of God are connected with the thought and wisdom of God their Father. This only demonstrates how the soul is connected with God's wisdom. How are we to explain that every soul is a piece of God Himself? To answer this question, the Tanya will now probe the unique quality of God's wisdom, how it differs from human wisdom. Concerning God's wisdom, the Tikkunei Zohar states, He is wise, but not with wisdom as we know it. The way God knows something is fundamentally different to the way humans know things. A person and his knowledge remain two separate entities. Information is something inquired. But, in the case of God, He and His wisdom are one, as the Rambam writes. And the Rambam explains that unlike humans, God is simultaneously the power to know, the knower, and the known.
That's like that will be.
Yeah. But this concept defies coherent mortal comprehension. As the verse states, can you find God by searching? And it is also written, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts." Rambam understood that God is his knowledge. The school of Kabbalah, on the other hand, described God as something much higher in knowledge, an abstract, infinite light. God's knowledge, the Kabbalists taught, is a mere emanation of that light. We can reconcile the two views by arguing that according to Lurianic Kabbalah, Rambam's view was correct in a certain context. Rambam's view can be contextualized for the secret doctrine of how the infinite light, the Ein Sof, of God underwent multiple diminishments to the point that it could enter finite vessels. Any description of the creation process must explain the paradox of how an infinite God gives rise to a finite world. Lurianic Kabbalah describes this transition as a process of infinite divine light entering and becoming enmeshed in somewhat finite, divine vessels. In this secret doctrine, God's knowledge is perceived as a quality endowed by the vessels, not the lights. Therefore, the Tanya suggests, Rambam's description of God as knowledge is true from a Lurianic perspective of the vessels, of God's intellectual powers of Chochmah, Bina, and Dat. As we discuss at length in the next chapter, God's intellect is understood by the Kabbalah to function for three distinct powers: inquiry, Chochmah, Bina, cognition, and Dat, which is recognition. We are speaking, and altogether, Chochmah, Bina, and Dat is what? Chabad.
Just throw that in there.
God's intellectual powers function in the world of Atzilus, in the nation, the world of divine attributes. We're speaking here of God's intellect, which functions in the highest of the spiritual worlds, Atzilus. But Rambam's assertion that God is synonymous with his knowledge is not correct above Atzilus, which is the realm of infinite light, Ein Sof, devoid of any definitive characteristics such as intellect. In conclusion, the Tanya offers us two metaphors to illustrate the intimate union of the divine soul with God. One, it was blown from God inert into us, a human being. It is derived from God's wisdom, which is totally one with Him.